Florida State is not viewed as an option for the SEC or the Big Ten. And if you're wondering why that is, I think there's a very simple answer for that. I had a little procedure on my eye, my right eye. It looks pretty gnarly. I'm already difficult to look at. I don't need to subject you to that. We don't have to go into that. But that's why the sunglasses are on today, because they're prescription and I can still see in them. But otherwise, you don't need to see my disgustingly gross, just horrifying eye. So we'll go sunglasses today. Florida State is not a member of the AAU, which is part of a deal breaker for the Big Ten. And I know I've had people in the comments be like, it's not a requirement to be a Big Ten member to be the AAU. Yeah, it's not a requirement that I don't cheat on my wife either, but it hasn't come up. But I'm guessing that if I were to do it, it wouldn't be a welcomed thing. Just because it's not written down on paper as this is an official requirement doesn't mean it's not a requirement. So that's step one. But then also maybe the bigger of the two. I think maybe to a lesser extent the SEC, but the Big Ten very much values everybody appearing to be in lockstep. If you remember back to the 2020 season that was originally canceled by Kevin Warren and the Big Ten presidents, and sidebar, I think Kevin Warren gets a bad rap for that. One, the idea that he's okay with his son playing football at Mississippi State. Well, yeah, his son's an adult. He can do whatever he damn well pleases. The idea that his dad, even though he's the commissioner of the Big Ten, and not to rehash this, I don't know why I'm getting into this, but the idea that his dad is canceling Big Ten football, but he's playing football at Mississippi State. It's yeah, he's an adult. He's allowed to do whatever he wants. His dad can't say you can't play football this year because of the Rona. And Kevin Warren's just doing what the Big Ten presidents told him to do. But during that time, it was important for the conference, very important for the conference, that everybody appeared to be a united front, that there were no dissenting voices, that there were no teams that were well, hey, why the hell aren't we playing? If everybody else is going to play, we look really dumb for not playing. And so when Nebraska came out, we're hell, we're going to play as an independent if the Big Ten tells us we can't. And the Big Ten lost their minds. And then it came out that, there was a vote to decide whether or not there would be football in 2020. And then it was out that there wasn't a vote. And then it was out that Michigan, Ohio State, and Nebraska were the schools that wanted to play and the others didn't. And the Big Ten had some egg on its face. And I think that it had some self-imposed egg on its face. I don't think anybody looked at that situation and thought that schools like Nebraska and Ohio State and Michigan were unreasonable for wanting to play. There are very few, I guess I should say, issues that everybody, especially now in a gigantic Big Ten, that everybody is going to agree 100% of the time, 100, there's not one topic that everybody's going to say, yes, I agree wholeheartedly. What we have proposed is fantastic, spectacular, best we can do, because there are just some things where it's better for one school or worse for another. Especially when you have programs in the Pacific Northwest, in Southern California, on the East Coast, in Middle America. Not everybody is going to be in lockstep. But the one thing that Florida State is right now that everybody can look at and go, that's not a fit, is there a bit of a rabble-rouser. When you sue your conference to get out of it, and we can discuss this till the end of time, you can say that that's not what Florida State's intentions are. It absolutely is. They are not suing the conference that they are in to stay in it. It doesn't make a lick of sense. So what they're doing is raising a bit of a stink. And when you are a conference that values to the nth degree everybody playing their part, doing what they're told, and toeing the conference line, picking up somebody who very clearly has a history now, that's what Florida State is, for better or worse, in the eyes of the Big Ten and SEC. You are a problem child. You are someone that we now have to figure out and deal with. Whether that's fair or not is not the topic of discussion. Because does Florida State have a case against the ACC? Does Florida State have reason to want out of that conference? Yeah, I think so. I think they're justified, and I think it's easy to see their points and go like, oh, well, yeah, I think I'm kind of picking up what you're putting down there. But when you look at it from the Big Ten's point of view, does Florida State add a ton of value to the conference? The answer is on the field, yes. On the basketball court, baseball diamond, yes. But in TV dollars, it's not the way it was when the original expansion happened in 2011. Rutgers in Maryland would not be in the Big Ten if not for cable TV. And believe it or not, nobody is going to create their football conferences anymore on the backs of cable TV. 27% of all TV viewing in America in June of 2024 happened on cable TV. Streaming was 40%. Broadcast TV was 20%. The idea that anybody's going to structure their conference over cable TV, those days are dead and gone. So your money now comes in the form of how many big-time games can we play? How many games can we play that have viewers more than 4 million? That's kind of the magic number. And does Florida State add some of those? Yeah, if they come along with Miami, Clemson, etc. But the Big Ten isn't going to open its doors and maybe more importantly, open its coffers to those schools if it's not going to drive up their revenue. Now, do I think it's ridiculous to say, like, if we were to bring in Florida State, Clemson, Miami, and North Carolina, or Virginia, Georgia Tech, whoever the case may be, if you were then to say, like, well, we would do that, but then we'd only get $109 million a year instead of $115 million a year. Like, it's a preposterous, super greedy, pigs get fed, hogs get slaughtered mentality. But that's what the Big Ten is looking at. The SEC, Florida State adds slightly less because they're not going to add any. In the Big Ten, they're going to make some extra money from Big Ten Network subscriptions. And if you can convince NBC, CBS, and Fox to pony up a little bit more, you're going to make some extra money by putting the Big Ten Network into Florida, into South Carolina, Virginia, North Carolina, Georgia, wherever you decide which of those ACC schools fit your conference needs. The SEC gets none of that. They get SEC network subscriptions into North Carolina and Virginia, where they likely already have them. And ESPN's not going to open up their coffers for schools that they already control the rights to. So the obvious answer is the Big 12. Now, what that looks like from a timeline standpoint, what that looks like from a legal standpoint is still like wholly up in the air. There are anybody who tells you that they have an idea of timeline, exit fees, any of that stuff, doesn't know what they're talking about because the lawyers don't know what they're talking about yet. But I'm just here to tell you that in a Big Ten that values academic prestige, Florida State is working its way towards there, doesn't have it just quite yet. But then also, when you have now proven yourself in the eyes of the real stuffy suits to be a problem child, to be somebody that you're going to be difficult to manage, and we're not 100% sure that you're going to kowtow the company line, it's just probably not a great fit. And while I think Florida State would be an awesome addition to the Big Ten, I think that would be a slam dunk if you can move the Big Ten into the Southeast, because we have seen it is a dog-eat-dog world. The Big Ten ate the Pac-12. The Big 12 ate the Pac-12. And if given the chance, the Big Ten and SEC are going to eat the ACC too. They are going to ensure its demise. And at some point, it's going to be an us versus them in a Big Ten versus SEC style showdown. Now, I don't think any of the Big Ten schools are going or are a threat to join the SEC under any real circumstance. The Big Ten schools, I think, are at risk of being split up by a college football super league that ends up, being a multi-billion-dollar enterprise that features Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, Wisconsin, Nebraska, Iowa, joining forces with Alabama, LSU, Florida, Georgia, Oklahoma, Texas. But that, I think, is somewhat far down the line. So if the ACC is at risk of being gobbled up, which in my opinion, if it comes out that the courts decide that the contracts that lock those schools in until 2036 are null and void and do not count, then it's going to be a free-for-all, and I think it's going to be important for the Big Ten to have a stronghold or a foothold even, whatever they can get in the Southeast. So if that's picking up Florida State, Miami, Georgia Tech, Clemson, whoever you can get from those southern states, it's going to be an us versus them at some point. And so for the Big Ten to say, we have schools in the Pacific Northwest, we have schools in Southern California, we have schools in the Midwest, we have schools in the New York metropolitan area, Washington, D.C., Atlanta, the Southeast. It's important for recruiting. It's important for geography. It's important for, while it's not the biggest driver, it's still somewhat important for cable TV. It's still important for TV purposes to have schools that you can have games from 11 a.m. at some point to start at 10 p.m. Eastern. All of those are important factors. But right now, the most important factor is if you're willing to sue the conference that you're in right now and the conference that you've been in for decades, what kind of issues are you going to bring to us? And I can't help but tell you that I promise you, somebody inside the Big Ten offices has brought that up because they're having these discussions. I guarantee you they're having discussions about if that conference is to splinter, who do we want? Who do we prioritize? Which makes the most sense? And if you're the kid that constantly gets sent to the principal's office because you got an issue or you're a Karen at the Panera Bread, you're not going to be the first pick. In whether that's fair or justified or not, that's what Florida State's viewed as right now. That'll do it for today's episode of the Daily Huddle. Appreciate you making us a part of your day, however it is, wherever it is you're doing so. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. Make sure you're getting all the great college football content we're pumping out. If you are listening to the podcast feed, drop a 5-star review. It goes a long way in helping out the channel. See you tomorrow for another episode here of the Daily Huddle.